Parents, what is something your child has done that you can never forgive them for? Story 1. My stepson came into my life when he was a preteen. He had a younger brother who was 6 years younger than him. The younger brother was relatively normal, but the older stepson was having a lot of trouble in school and got in trouble all the time. The older stepson is in counseling because of his behavior. He's hurting himself in school and making an attempt to end everything. I'm devoting lots of time to trying to help him and fix his life. He's incredibly intelligent and thoughtful. In the middle of all this, we find he has tens of thousands of private photos. We deleted them, consulted a lawyer, brought it up in counseling, locked the computer down, and installed monitoring software. Stepson, who figures out how to get around everything, is clearly into it. He's in middle school and brings home his younger girlfriend's knickers. I take them away, and he comes at me with a weapon. The police are called, but he's smart and knows how to work them. We found a treatment program to deal with his fixation. We went to counseling once a week and group counseling once a week. Part of this program is admitting your wrongs. You have to come out and admit it in front of the group. He drops a bombshell. He's been violating his younger brother, and he forced himself on his now ex-girlfriend. The DA won't press charges because there's no proof. So we have to do this all voluntarily. We have to ask the state to please take him and give him services. If we don't, the state will take his younger brother and place him in protective care. It's a pretty traumatic process. He's removed from the home and placed in a day treatment program by social services, but only after several awkward months. In the meantime, his younger brother is having issues. He throws tantrums all the time and has to be restrained at home. We learn how to restrain our kid to prevent him from hurting himself. Treatment does not go well. He hates the program and the restrictions on his life. He's much smarter than the other kids in the program, so he becomes sort of a ringleader. He's labeled high risk and a potential psychopath. Eventually, he's about to turn legal and the state is going to end their custody over him since he's a voluntary case. He has to figure out what to do or he'll be homeless as he can't come back to living with us. He asks us if we could just kick his younger brother out of the home and make him go live in state care so he can live at home. I forgave him for most of it, but I'll never be able to forgive him for that moment where he absolutely remorsefully, where he asked if he could just take the place of his brother because the path he had chosen made his life harder. He knew very well what he was asking, and he was never sorry for his actions. This all ended several years ago. The older brother is now working and has stable housing, but we really don't keep in touch. The younger brother currently lives with me and is doing well. His mom and I are no longer together. We were never married. Stepson is just the only word I know to describe my relationship with the two brothers. Mighty respect to this dude. That younger kid is lucky to have him in his life, and if it weren't for him, I'm not sure what'll happen to that younger kid either. Story 2. I'm not a parent, but I did something that my mother will never forgive me for. Before I begin, you need to know some information about my mom. My mom is Catholic. She's been going to church every Sunday since she was 5. She believes that a man and woman shouldn't have intimate relations until after marriage. Me and my high school girlfriend were hanging out after school at my house, as usual. Things started getting hot and heavy and we started making out, and at the time, I finally thought I was going to lose my V card. I'd been with this girl for 3 years and I had never even gotten sloppy. I had seen her undressed and touched her a bit, but that's as far as we had ever gone. Mid-makeout, my girlfriend just stops and asks me if I want a sloppy. Obviously, I said yes. I was finally getting some and it felt great, and I was loving every moment of it until my mom walked in. Instead of knocking on my room door like she usually does before entering, she just opened the door. I don't know what a mother's reaction should be in this type of situation, but she started yelling at my girlfriend. And when I say yelling, I mean I heard her say words that I had never heard her ever say before, ever. She called my girlfriend easy and said that God would damn us both to hell for our acts of sin. My girlfriend at this point is in tears and she's scrambling to get on her clothes, leaving me in a panic. My mom didn't speak to me for like a month after that. She didn't ask how my day was at school. She didn't speak to me during dinner, and she didn't even ask me to go to church on Sunday with her anymore. She used to go every Sunday, but I always said no. That's the angriest I have ever seen my mom, and we have never spoken about it. When she finally did talk to me, she said if I wanted her to ever speak with me again, I had to go to confession and confess my sins. I told her I would go, but I ended up going to a Denny's and ordering their lumberjack Grand Slam instead. She thinks I went to confession, though. Also, every time my girlfriend came over after the incident, my mom would leave the house. I don't know where she went, but she couldn't be in the same vicinity as her. The worst part of it all was that my girlfriend didn't attempt to give me another slappy for a whole year because she was so scared of my mother walking in on us. Story 3. Well, this will be an interesting one. For the record, I am the son in question. I remember the day when I told my mother that my teen girlfriend was pregnant. Something changed in my mother, and it definitely was not for the better. I knew I had messed up, but didn't truly understand the struggle like my mother did. You see, my mother had me when she was young. She had scholarships to go to art school and potentially make something of herself. She ended up taking care of me instead. I remember my mother looking at me and saying, "You are stupid if you choose to take care of that child." We got into a fight over it. I felt that since I was the dum-dum that got my girlfriend knocked up, I should be the one to take care of it. I had computer repair skills and a knack for working hard. Finding work wouldn't be that hard, would it? Fast forward a few years and I can understand just exactly what she meant. Please note, I do love my children every single day, and I wouldn't trade them for anything. I spent those years watching as all my friends grew further away from me. Most got distant and didn't want to talk to a guy who had 2 jobs and a kid. I was a buzzkill for most of them. I struggled and pushed through everything that I had to do to take care of her. I honestly wasn't sure if I was going to make it for a while. 2 jobs making minimum wage isn't enough to afford daycare and a 1-bedroom apartment here in Iowa. I feel like I lost a portion of my sanity through those times. I spent most of it wondering what life would be like if I gave her up for adoption and did what my mother suggested. Would I be happier? I would have graduated and had a job making significantly more money than I do now. I did eventually prosper, but my mother and I have never been the same. She lost custody of me when she was younger because she couldn't keep up. She was definitely proud of me when I received my degree and got a real job. It took 6 years to do what would have taken 2. I still did it, though. My mother was never going to forgive me for putting myself through exactly what she went through. I proved her wrong nonetheless. And just because you're destined to fail doesn't mean you will. I have a second beautiful daughter and a wonderful girlfriend whom I plan on marrying next year. Story 4. My son was a great kid as a child, but as a preteen, he started to really change. In 5th grade, the school told them to draw pictures of what they did over the summer. He drew a picture of what we did on the 4th of July and was promptly sent to an alternative school because he made threats by drawing pictures of explosives. The problem was that the district had one alternative school that contained all the kids from elementary school to high school. He got 3 weeks. We fought the punishment hard because it was BS. The problem is, by the time we got some movement where they were lifting it, he had started getting into trouble at the alternative school. He was the middle kid and he would try way too hard to fit in. So now that the school had relented on the original punishment, he was in trouble and sentenced to more time in the alternative center because of his behavior there. He spent the rest of the semester there, got back to regular school after the new semester, and then wound up going back for other stuff. Anyway, a year or so later, his mom and I split up. He came with me, along with his little brother, and our daughter stayed with her mom. He progressively got worse as he went through puberty, having more and more trouble with school, being extremely mean and defiant, etc. One thing to note is that illegal substances were never really an issue. The couple of times he got in trouble for saying he did them, I took him for tests and they always came up negative. This happened about 4 times. He would just lie to get into trouble. I'm not saying he never did them, but there was never any solid evidence he did. Move forward about 2 years, we had been camping, and when we got home, he immediately sat down to play Xbox. I told him we needed to get things sorted out and that he could play afterwards in about 30 minutes. He got super irritated, stomped to his room, slammed the door, and then locked it. I brought in another load or 2, and after about 5 minutes, I went to talk to him. His door was locked, so after trying to get him to answer me through the door, I went and got a key. He did this a lot. I replaced the doorknob with one that had a key so I could get in when he did, and walked in to see that my son had tried to end himself. I yelled for my girlfriend at the time to call 911 and started trying to pull him down. I had to hold his body against the wall with mine so I could untie him. I laid him down and started CPR, and after a few cycles, I got a very thready pulse and he started agonal breathing, so I stopped and monitored the pulse, but it faded again. So I started CPR again, and this happened for a few cycles before the ambulance arrived. They induced a coma and he made it through this ordeal, but it was a huge loss. He was diagnosed with anoxic brain injury, which knocked a lot of his intelligence off. The recovery was slow and he spent 6 weeks in rehab. For the first year, he was very sweet again. He made it back to high school and then it got 1,000 times worse than ever. He started getting very physically inappropriate as well as having violent outbursts. One day, he didn't even come home from school. I panicked, and after calling the cops to report him lost, we found out he had been taken to jail. The cops or school never notified me they were doing it. It turns out the school resource officer at the middle school where my youngest son was going called it in. He had roughed up his little brother at the bus stop and blackened his eye. Bam, he's in jail. The state had these charges, so there was nothing I could do. He was not allowed to be around his brother unsupervised, so by extension, he can't live with me anymore. So he moves to his mom's house and is in jail again 6 weeks later for roughing up both his mom and his sister. Now you have a kid with a brain injury that the state will not allow to live with any of his siblings. My mother and father, who was on dialysis at the time, said that they could handle him, so they took him in. They had helped out a lot when he was in rehab and stuff, and he never got upset with them, so we agreed. And everything was fine for about 7 months until Christmas came along. They took him to my brother's house in the middle of the week. I was to meet them there on the weekend. I drive down and walk into hell breaking loose. Apparently, he had exposed himself to a cousin and got confrontational when confronted with it. My mother tried to intervene and he shoved her and she fell. That made the third charge against him and this one against the elderly along with an indecency charge. The way it worked in the county, though, was that they could not take him until after an investigation took place. This made no sense to me, but whatever. Anyway, I had to load him up, drive him back home for 4 hours, and miss Christmas with my family. He wound up with a 3-year sentence over all of this and served 18 months of it. Right now, he's out of jail and has his own place. It's a small RV, but it's his. I haven't seen him in maybe 3 months and have only talked to him once on the phone. I was 4 miles from him over Thanksgiving and came very close to going by and seeing him, but I didn't. So the part I can't forgive, for one, my father, who I was very close to, passed away the next summer. Because of my son, I missed the last Christmas with him. More than that, though, I will never, ever forgive him for the thoughts I have had throughout all of this. A parent should never have to wonder if they did the right thing by saving his life. I hate that I have wondered how the last 6 years might have been had he passed away that day. He was in intensive therapy for a long time before he attempted to end himself. He was actually hospitalized several times and was in a residential system. The best we can determine is that he was having seizures in his frontal lobe, and this caused him to have issues with impulse control. He was medicated for this and was actively taking it when he made the attempt. I have looked through some of the paperwork from when he was in jail, and there are some signs that he may be suffering from schizophrenia. But because of his age, I can't get any information that he isn't willing to provide. Wow, that's heavy. I hope this dad realizes it's not his fault. If this story has struck a chord with you, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more impactful stories. It really does help our channel out. Thanks. Story 5. This story is kind of the opposite of the question. My mother forgave me for something I never thought she would. This was a few years ago. I had lost my job and was going broke quickly. I needed money for rent and bills, and I really had nowhere to go. One day, I just panicked and committed an armed robbery to get a few bucks. I figured that if I wasn't caught immediately, I would get away with it. 5 days later, the police are at my door. They take me to the station and charge me with robbery. I deny everything, but all I could think of was that the next few years would be in prison. I had only spent 5 days in jail previously for a DUI leading to this event. When they finally booked me, they told me I could make one phone call. The only number I knew was my mother's. It's been the same since I was a kid. I turned the call down. I was just too embarrassed. A few days later, I had to go to the doctor for a physical. The nurse asks if anyone knows I'm in jail. I don't know why I told her, but I mentioned that I chickened out of calling my mom. She points to a phone in the office and tells her I can call her now. I just remember the phone ringing and hoping to God she wasn't home, but she was. I expected her to disown me, but she just seemed more concerned about my safety and if I needed anything. She said she would be proud of me no matter what I did. The next day, the jail tells me I have a visitor. I walk in there, and there's my mom. She starts crying and just smiles. She tells me that she's happy to see me and that she put $100 on my books so I can buy some supplies because she knows no one else would do it for me. I received cards weekly, and even when I told her to stop sending money, I would get a random $50. I guess the point is that she never gave up on me. My mother and I talk all the time, more than before. I still get cards about once a month with a note inside reminding me of how proud she is of me. Story 6. I'm the stepfather to my wife's 3 kids, a son, 2 daughters. The younger 2 are great kids, but the oldest daughter has always had a knack for choosing the wrong thing to do in situations. She, of course, does the normal teenager thing of consistently choosing to hang around the wrong people, despite her mother's and I's attempt to get her to not repeat our own past mistakes. She got into ICE. We put her in inpatient rehab, which she fell out of and relapsed into. We put her in outpatient rehab, which she fell out of and relapsed into. Insurance has covered all they will, so we tried having her join Narcotics Anonymous for a while, and again, she relapsed. When she realizes we're going to find out, she crosses the final line. She robbed us blind while we were both at work and took off with a guy she was hooking up with. I could have gotten over the material things. Well, stuff is stuff anyway, right? But she went farther than just cleaning out the house. She stole my wife's identity and cleaned out our bank account. We were very much living check to check at the time, and bills were not all perfectly on time. This was catastrophic to our finances. Insurance fought the claim as it was a family member who lived in the residence and had permission to use things she took. We also were not great at documenting possessions, so they were really fighting the things we claimed. In the end, we dropped the entire claim out of frustration and slowly replaced essential things out of our own pockets, but we only ever really replaced about 25% of the items. Bills got dangerously behind, having to beg and borrow from family to keep the lights on. The wife took a very hard emotional hit from her daughter doing this and blamed herself, despite my assurances that she raised her well and that she chose to go down this path on her own. The wife ends up sinking into depression and losing her job due to calling in sick too many times. I've managed well enough by a small miracle to keep things afloat with the help of family and serious overtime. The wife managed to get another job, paying less, but still it's something. We'd gotten to an untenable position even with her new job and were losing the house. We managed to find another place that was smaller but a few hundred less in rent as well, as in less utilities as it was newer construction too. The daughter was arrested and sent to a local jail pending identity theft charges. Stress was high as my wife and daughter tried to work things out. The wife develops medical issues and she has to cease working. It turns out the last 2 years of stress really took a toll, and it appears after some significant testing that she has MS and it's getting worse quickly unless she takes steps to reduce her stress. Eventually, we dropped the identity theft charges with the stipulation on my end that she never, ever live with us again for any reason. Daughter moves to another city a couple of hours away, keeps in sparse contact, and visits maybe once or twice on her way in and out of town for concerts. She seems to have finally cleaned up, but she is too broke to help us at all. The wife, in the meantime, can't get a disability yet due to her social life being royally screwed up due to the identity theft. I get a second job and work 70, 80-hour weeks to pay the bills. We downsize a lot. We lost both of our cars and I bought a $1,000 20-year-old clunker. We sell whatever we can, not really much left, that doesn't have too much sentimental value, and I cash out my 401k. It's now 4 years later. I'm still working 70, 80 hours a week. Our bills are finally stable, but I'm still paying off almost $80,000 in debt. I've still not gotten a new car and have spent around $1,000 a year keeping this old one running. No, I can never forgive her for this. Let me add a couple of things. The kids at the time were in their late 20s, so they are all living on their own now. However, 2 years ago, the daughter I focus on in the story did get pregnant. My wife and I both agreed she would not be a fit mother, and quite frankly, the kid was at high risk of not making it to term with her substance use. So after some discussion and consultation with our supportive family, We agreed to adopt the baby since my wife had a full hysterectomy before we met and really regretted not having a child with me. The adoption was finally finalized this September, and she just turned 2 this past Saturday. I'm sure that some of you are probably considering me clinically insane for taking this last step, even after everything else. But I assure you that this part has in fact worked out for the best. My wife, having to care for a child again, is pulling her out of the depression this put her in, and I absolutely and unequivocally love this child and live every day to make her life better. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you made it this far, I'm sure you'll also enjoy insane secrets that kids are hiding. Story 6 will make you think twice about hiding your shenanigans from your parents. I'll see you in that video, and thank you for watching this one.